It's happening, guys. We're finally getting looks and tidbits about the upcoming Witcher game. I've been replaying The Witcher because I'm working on the big kind of retrospective revisit of the game where I kind of, I play back through it. I look at the critiques I made back in 2017, and then I kind of update them and see what I think of the game now with modern contexts and seeing what they did with Cyberpunk and everything else. I still love The Witcher 3. There's definitely some clunk. There's some things that it doesn't do great that I would like to see them improve in future games. But in general, I love The Witcher 3 so much. And that came out in 2015. Cyberpunk came out in 2020 and took a little while to get updated, but now it's updated. It's getting there. And just a handful of days ago, we also started getting updates on the development process and where they're at in terms of like team assignments and stuff like that. So they posted this on their investor relations page where they said, you know, as of July 31st, 2024, they had 410 people working on Polaris, which is the next Witcher game. It's not going to be called The Witcher 4, but it'll be something. It's the next Witcher game. And as of October 31st, they had moved to 400 people and it had entered full production. So it was no longer pre-production. They were no longer finalizing gameplay systems and tools and stuff. That's done. Now they're just building the game. It's like they've got all of the instruction books, they've got all the Lego pieces, and now they're just building. They've got the bags all lined up in a row, numbered, and they're ready to just get it. You know, that's where they're at now. But they've started to do interviews talking about this project. And I'm here for it because they are trying to be more communicative. They're trying to be transparent. They're trying to be real with everybody and make clear kind of what their goals are, what their intentions are. And it all sounds very interesting. So earlier this week, CD Projekt joint CEO Michael Nowakowski announced the next game in the Witcher franchise, otherwise known as Project Polaris and unofficially referred to by most as just The Witcher 4. It's finally entered what he described as full-scale production, the most intensive phase of development. It's good news for Witcher fans, of course, although information remains incredibly thin when it comes to what exactly we can expect from the game itself, or even when we might hear more. All that's been publicly shared so far is that early phase development was confirmed back in March of 22, that the game won't focus, quote unquote, on previous protagonist Geralt of Rivia, and that Geralt's voice actor, Doug Cockle, will still be part of the new game in some way. There's a bajillion ways that this could go. The rumor has been for a long time that it's going to be a make your own Witcher, that it's going to be like fully custom character like a lot of RPGs. There's that as a possibility. I'd say the odds are also pretty damn high that they consider doing like a spin-off sort of game where you play as Ciri or something like that. All of those are possibilities. Hearing that basically Geralt will be in the game, it seems. It won't focus on him, but that suggests he'll be there out of focus. So that he'll be there and the voice actor will be there. That suggests that it's something around that time period. And maybe it's just, make your own Witcher, but it's when Geralt is really young, or it's when he's really old and he's just helping train you or something. Maybe that's what they do, but I don't think it's going to be just like a total reinvention of the wheel unnecessarily. Having spoken to a number of people from CD Projekt, including Nowakowski, over the past year for our long read on what happened with Cyberpunk 2077 and how the company turned it around, there are a few nuggets of info we can share that might help piece together some extra context. First up, a bit of chatter about process, albeit chatter that leads into a few other little hints of what we can expect about how things are going. One of the few other tidbits of already public information is that CDPR has moved away from its own bespoke internal Red engine to the more widely adopted Unreal, which is owned by Epic. Quote, I know a lot of people are curious about it, so I'll try to explain, said CDPR's Vice President of Tech, Charles Tremblay, earlier this year, Riley joking that the decision has been, quote, very polarizing question in general for the company and for everyone. He explained that, contrary to popular belief, the Red Engine wasn't the specific cause of the studio's troubles with Cyberpunk's development, and nor was its severely troubled launch the key reason for the switch. Quote, the first thing I want to say, to be sure, 100% clear, is that the whole team, myself included, are extremely proud of the engine we built for Cyberpunk. So it's not about this is so bad that we need to switch and, kill me now. That is not true. That is not true. And this is not why the decision was made to switch. Instead, it came down to the developer wanting to have multiple projects in development at once, namely the next Witcher game, the further off Cyberpunk sequel codenamed Orion, and the still distant new IP codenamed Hadar. Quote, the way we built stuff in the past was very one-sided, like one project at a time. We pushed the limit, but we also we saw that if we wanted to have a multi-project at the same time, building in parallel, sharing technology together, it is not easy, he said. But that is easy with Unreal when Epic is the one doing all of that work. The other factor was the developer felt that it could benefit from, quote, having a good partnership with Epic and working together on the technology, as Tremblay put it. We can also help them to achieve their vision to do open world games, and also they can help us too from some technical perspectives on some of the aspects that we would like them to, and that we would like to not have to be focusing on as much, because in the end we are a game company, right? In other words, it's a decision made with the intention of getting more of CDPR's developers working on the games themselves. And this is something I've heard from a lot of different people. I actually heard this from a BGS, a former BGS developer, who was like, I love making games. I don't love wrestling with an engine. Like, I want to make video games. I don't want to be trying to figure out how to make this level load properly so that the floor stays as a physical object. It's like, that's not where the passion lies. That sucks the soul out of everybody that's working on it. He's like, let engineers build the stuff that we use, and then let the artists and developers make the games. Like, let's just not stress about it. And I think that that's been a problem for a lot of these big studios, is the bigger they get, the more ambitious the games get. They sort of have to turn into a software engineering firm that's making a game engine. And then it also has another team that makes video games with that. And it's just not that practical after a little while. They go on, we can share expertise, share people, share knowledge. And also we want to be sure that we develop some of the technology correctly this time around with our expertise. We know how to do things with the experience we had in the past. And now it's time to actually make it shareable across all the groups. The other piece of this too is that most students work in university with Unreal Engine, because it's something that they can very easily get on all of the students' computers, and you can train with it. There's special deals for education licenses and stuff like that. So a lot of students come out of university knowing how to work with Unreal Engine, meaning you don't have to hire somebody and spend 6 months training them how to do stuff on the toolkit. You just have it, and they just start work, and then they can, maybe there's some unique tools that you use and some unique processes or something, but in general, it's much easier to just let them get into it. Like, you guys remember, we watched that video of Will Shen. So background, lead quest designer on Starfield, worked at BGS. The second they got bonuses, he quit and left to go work at a different studio. And this is a speech he's giving in San Francisco back in March about the development process over at BGS and kind of how dysfunctional it was. But he's about to describe how much of their development process was now tied up in like documentation, in using Confluence, Slack, OBS and stuff, all of that, because this guy, the lead quest dude, had to spend a lot of his time making tutorials to teach new employees how to use their tools.
Like hallway conversations that was hiding work that was being requested. And finally, we had to do a lot more tutorials. So I was in OBS Studio a lot making video tutorials. So on Fallout 4, when I needed to teach someone the tool set, I would just sit down with them and answer their questions. But now we were working with people from around the nation, sometimes around the globe. I often didn't know when they would need me, and I often didn't know who might need me or what they would need to know. So it became absolutely critical to do a lot more tutorials and how-tos about every feature of the toolkit. Again,
It's so crazy to me that you have a senior developer who is having to spend time making tutorials. That seems like that's something that should, like, it sounds bad, but should be beneath him. Like, he should be making bigger decisions. He should be working more on like big picture ideas, on how to make the quests more engaging, on how to do this, on how to, like, spending time filming tutorials is ridiculous. But that's also one of the benefits of having a tool set that's more familiar to more people, is that they can get into it much faster and you don't need to spend all that time. Or because of this partner with Epic, you can just have Epic go and create a series of tutorials for you with their media team, because Epic has a huge media team, and just be like, hey, can you make a tutorial on how to use this toolkit for onboarding new employees. Like, yep, bada bing, bada boom. So let's see. Yeah. So the idea was that we can push the technology. We can finally have all the technical people in the company working together on different projects rather than super centralized into one technology that can be very difficult and shared between projects. We can share experience, share people, share knowledge, and also wanted to be sure that we developed some of the technology correctly this time around, blah, blah, like I said. One of the major lessons for CDPR after its issues with Cyberpunk was the studio's difficulty with balancing its ambition. The confidence in delivering on that ambition that bordered on magical thinking, as joint CEO Nowakowski put it to me, with the realities of the studio's rapid growth and surprise obstacles of COVID-19. But Tremblay, as well, or as with many other developers at CDPR, maintained that the team's ambition itself remains undimmed. Again, I will not say it's easy, he added, but I think that we have some cool stuff going, and hopefully that will have some good showcase of the technology. The only thing I will say is that changing the tech for us does not change the fact that we will always be ambitious. And the next game will not be smaller, and it will not be worse. I'd hope so. So it will be better, bigger, and greater than The Witcher 3. It will be better than Cyberpunk because for us, it's unacceptable to launch that way. We don't want to go back. Even if there will be some sweaty moments and maybe even some bad stuff happening, still, I think we will try everything we can to make it even more than what we achieved in the past years. So the technology should not be a blocker for us, basically. I mean, I'd hope so. I'd hope that it's bigger and better than what you did before. That should always kind of be the case, but okay. Coming back to the next Witcher game, moving up to full-scale production, Tremblay also explained part of what that process looks like for CDPR. Tremblay's recent role since moving up from being very much in the trenches on Cyberpunk has been to pretty much oversee the tech development across all the products, as he described it. One aspect of that includes speaking with the various game directors across the studio's projects in North America and Europe, reviewing what they're doing, challenging them, approving when we go, and then making recommendations to the board about whether the studio is ready to press on with a project on the technical side of things. This is a new process for CDPR, or a new process CDPR brought in as part of its response to Cyberpunk at launch, with the studio allowing more time for pre-production and conducting regular reviews on whether the technology is ready for each individual project to move forward, including in some cases delaying that step where necessary. So literally, this is interesting. So they literally are reviewing projects during pre-production, and then they are having technical directors tell the board of directors whether the tech is ready to go into full production for what they want to do. So the example would be like, oh, you want to do full NPC sim in this big medieval city for The Witcher 4. Okay, does the tech support generating that many NPCs and their day-night cycles and their activities and stuff like that? Do we have that tech ready to go? And they only move on to full development once the tech directors sign off on all of that the tech is actually ready. I like that. That sounds good. Like literally relying on the experts to say when it's ready, and then you move to the next step. I like that. How it works and what we're doing, Tremblay explains, is basically we have different stages of the project where we have different requirements for tech. Then basically with me and the tech directors, we nail down, we agree on this is what we want to nail, and we work together to make sure this happens. Then if we go into pre-production, we will prepare all the tooling to scale up the production and the number of content people. If it's not ready, or if it's just a specific thing that is not ready, then we can discuss, okay, what can we do next? How are we going to approach it? And we can also discuss whether to delay as not as in delay release, but delay in terms of like before we scale up production. And then we go to the board or the other people and we discuss the reason why, and it's usually perfectly fine. It's easy to discuss in a very pragmatic approach that like, this is why the reason we cannot go forward with different environments with the production is because they are not ready. And if we do so, we'll pay later because everything they will do will not work. We'll have to go, as with Cyberpunk, catch up during production. We don't want to do that again. So again, it just sounds like they took some lessons from Cyberpunk 2077's launch and don't want to get ahead of themselves trying to do something that their tech cannot support, which that's kind of refreshing because not many studios do that nowadays. A lot of studios are like, we'll figure it out later. We'll figure it out. That's the old story where it was almost word for word. Basically, after like the rough launch of Fallout 4, moving into Fallout 76, there was reporting that people within Bethesda were saying, we'll pull it off. We'll figure it out. We made Skyrim. we made Fallout 4. We can do this. We can get Fallout 76 working. It didn't end up working, but they said that. And with Cyberpunk, there were stories that came out where a lot of people, I think it was in Jason Schreier's article, people said, this isn't working, this is buggy, this isn't ready for launch. And directors were saying, just be calm. We made The Witcher 3. It'll work out. The magic will work out. And it didn't. But they now are very clear that they don't want to run into that problem again. So they are trying to avoid it. He suggested a good example would be like console builds not working. So having the console working super late, it's unacceptable anymore. And it's part of our process. So we do the reviews on console. So we know exactly where we are on all the platforms. The lower platforms we have, rather than, PC is fine, so we can go forward. So we changed this approach to have a broader visibility on the other platforms we want to have. When it comes to the next major games launch, major games launch, Tremblay also gave the rough steer on what the studio's strategy will be when it comes to those additional platforms. One of Cyberpunk's major development struggles came from its issues with last-gen consoles and their hard drive write speeds. For example, read writes? Yeah, hard drive read-write speeds. I asked whether CDPR would consider an approach similar that Larian took with Baldur's Gate 3, where it launched on PC first and then consoles a few months later to buy a little more time. Ironically, Larian boss Sven Vicky later explained this was partially to also avoid some major releases at the time, including the Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty expansion, which is kind of funny. It's something we discussed, actually, Tremblay told me, but we're not 100% sure. Maybe, so it's hard to say if we want to go this way at this stage. I would assume that as long as I understand like the strategy we want to do, I'm just trying not to say too much, bear with me. Most likely the launch, we will not have a PC only launch, for example. I don't think this is a strategy we want to adopt right now. That being said, will it mean that we will have, let's say there were 20 platforms available, we'll have 20 at launch? Maybe not, but at least PC only, then scattered. It's not necessarily the approach we want moving forward, for sure. I interpret that as they probably come out on the PS5. So, well, I guess it depends on when it comes out. Because my guess is this is still about 3 years away, which would put it 2027, still before next-gen consoles, most likely. So my guess is that they will have it on like PS5 and Xbox Series X, maybe not S, but X. They might have to play hardball with them. But as for like other platforms with like handhelds, the rumored Xbox handheld, the rumored PlayStation handheld, that stuff probably not supported at launch, but maybe later. It's kind of what it seems like. Meanwhile, Pavel Sasko, the lead quest designer on The Witcher 3 and is now the associate game director for Project Orion, the Cyberpunk sequel, also shared a bit of extra content on Cyberpunk's development team sizes and timeframes, firstly in the case of Project Hadar, the studio's new IP. I spoke to Sasko twice for Eurogamer's big Cyberpunk 2077 article, the first time as far back as spring of 23, the second time in the spring again of this year. Back in 2023, Sasko described the Hadar team as incredibly tiny, not incredibly tiny. It's a small group of people that are putting like a small concept board into that. And it will become a game because you need to slowly get there, but it's in its early stages, right? It's not a full-blown production where we have like 600 people team working on it. Come spring 24, there was a smidge more detail. Nothing Hadar is still in early stages, so in that ideation phase, or however you call it, it requires constant communication, bouncing ideas. The Boston-based team that's focused on the Cyberpunk sequel, meanwhile, is what he described as, quote, a pretty tight core team composed out of the directors that have been shipping Cyberpunk and Phantom Liberty. Part of the studio's decision was to set up there alongside proximity to some of the top universities and tech companies for recruitment, and the ability to become one of the biggest players on the US's East Coast was to straddle the time zones of Vancouver, which houses a CDPR studio composed of mostly engineers, and Warsaw, which is now mostly art. The Cyberpunk sequel team remains fairly small for AAA, he said at the time. Again, this is, people forget about it, but like being close to universities and tech companies for recruitment, that's a big deal. Talent's a big deal. In that Mark Alexis Cote interview that we talked about earlier in the stream, he was saying how like in the full interview, you can hear him. He says right now, one of the problems is that the talent, the seniority that we need for these projects is just not really there. It's really, really difficult to find hardcore experienced talent. It's really tough. There's just not that many people that have 10, 20 years of experience that have shipped 4 or 5 games that have done really well. That talent is just not really there. It's extremely rare. A lot of those people have spun off, done their own studios. A lot of those people don't want to get tied up into big corporate AAA development again, and they're good. Not for the pay they're offering. Well, maybe that's part of it. The pay could be part of it. They do pay pretty well. If you look at these job postings, I mean, some of these people in these senior roles are making 200, 300,000 a year. Like they get paid pretty solid, but game development is hard. You work on one thing for 5-6 years and it might still flop because the board of directors decided to cram extra microtransactions into it, or because it happened to be in a genre that's really unpopular at that time, 5 years after you started working on it. You know, there's just a lot of frustrations that come with working in a big corporate world versus working in a smaller team where you know everybody and it's your game to control. You know, it's not always about money. Sometimes it is, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it is just a matter of money where people aren't being paid well. But a lot of these studios that are like top of the industry pay pretty well. From Software does not pay very well, but that's kind of an exception. A lot of these more Western gaming companies like EA, like Ubisoft, for example, apparently pays really well. A lot of these big guys pay well. Just say Concord already. Yeah, I think everybody got paid really well on Concord. I'll tell you what. I think everybody made bank on that, except for the company that made it. I think they were all swimming in it. Let's see. Thirdly and finally with Sasco, there was a little discussion of the Witcher studio. Quote, that team is probably the biggest team, the team that took all the Witcher Cyberpunk devs on board and is working on their game. I don't know certainly the exact number, he said. It's like a couple hundred there as of around March of this year. Notably, that's a bit earlier than this recent announcement that full-scale production had begun. It's tempting to infer that fairly significant pre-production work has been going on for a little while before the public confirmation. But then it's worth remembering that Tremblay's explanation of how that new process works. It may be that this time has been spent getting the technological side of things ready for the full development started in earnest. Likewise, a few hundred isn't as big as it sounds for CDPR these days. While around 300 people worked on The Witcher 3, 350 worked on Phantom Liberty alone. The studio now employs something in the region of 1,400 people worldwide. Yeah, but I mean, they employ 1,400 people, but not all of those people are devs. There's a difference. Sticking with inferences, there's also one more bit of information we might be able to glean, this time from a conversation with joint CEO Michael Nowakowski. Like a lot of developers I spoke to from CDPR, he described his mindset on the studio's future releases. Quote, optimistic. I feel optimistic because I'm, in general, an optimistic person. But on the more realistic side, I think that's actually part of why I'm optimistic. Is I think we are aware as an organization that, let's say, what was one example with Phantom Liberty coming back to 95%, currently 94% on positive Steam reviews, nothing is granted forever. And I think it's something that's important, that it's important for us to understand. And I think also for all the people in the company, there's no magic. There's only hard work and making sure you stay on the right course. With future games, he added, quote, with The Witcher or, with Cyberpunk in the future, it's only down to us. Everything can fail, but it's our role to make sure it doesn't. And remembering and understanding that I think is the biggest reason for me to be optimistic, because in the company, everyone's constantly worried, but worried in a good way, if you know what I mean. Worried that we're going to do it in a good enough way. Are we for sure not letting something slip through our fingers? And if you're that kind of worried, I think that gives us better chances of being successful in the future than thinking we can't fail because we're too big or too whatever, noses up are some things. And this makes me, this is good. I think that's a good thing. What's the story that's been told time and time again this year? It's this sort of toxic positivity where nobody wanted to be critical about anything with Concord or with Suicide Squad. Nobody wanted to come out and say, this isn't going to work. This is a bad idea. It just was not allowed within the company culture. If you said anything like that, you were considered a hater or something like that. Whereas here you can see that they're describing a situation where like they're constantly doubting, is this the right choice? Are we doing the right thing? Is this not good enough? We need to figure this out. Like that anxiety, that careful consideration, that's crucial. And I think that's really, really good. I think that's good. Could just be corporate talk here, but I think this is more candid than you would typically hear with corporate speak, where people are like, well, we're really excited for the future projects and we think people are going to love it and shareholders are going to eat it up and it's going to be amazing and fantastic. Like, this seems much more candid. One of the specific lessons the studio took from Cyberpunk, which was or has particular relevance here to bring things back to the next announcement, was to be smarter in how we want to announce and kick off marketing campaigns, he said. To be honest, when we were kicking off the marketing campaign officially with pre-orders, which was with Keanu on stage, the moment in E3 2019, the plan was actually to launch roughly 1 year later. It just didn't really work. So we didn't really plan for like a 2-year campaign, and we still think that 1 year would really be fine in terms of time for a promotional campaign of that game. The studio learned a lot of good practices from that experience, so announce the date when you're like really, really sure of it, and now I think we have much better tools to be sure of that date, which we, on a smaller scale, proved to ourselves with Phantom Liberty. While that campaign lasted around 6 months, given it was only an expansion, Nowakowski added that for a new game, we would still expect a slightly longer, but not 2-year lasting campaign. So probably a year to year and a half is the max that they'd be comfortable with, is what that sounds like. Having said that, I want to stress it doesn't mean we would not tease or drop some cool assets before a full reveal, because the marketing campaign slightly earlier before the launch of the game, that's different than the actual, say, Mass Attack. Mass Attack is when you announce the date, start collecting pre-orders, and it's really that race from that point. That moment to the moment that you launch the game. For example, he said, if I ask you, what do you want to know about The Witcher 4? The answer is not much. Probably yes. There's theories and so on, but there's nothing really specific. Or what do you know about The Witcher 4? Not what do you want to know? So we want to drop the crumbs here and there so people in the media as well can, pick up on it and try to figure it out, what we're trying to say at that time. So that is something we can start doing a little bit earlier. That would involve aspects such as having some video assets or something to whet the appetite of the fans, not even to create the hype so much, he said, as to simply get the early conversations flowing. Another note on platforms too, another big thing the studio took from the mistakes of Cyberpunk was what they described as the focus on target platform. During marketing from the off, quote, I think what put us into a lot of trouble is how late we started with the PS4 and Xbox One back in the day. And we don't ever want to be in that same spot again. What can we take from that? Well, expect at least a year, but most likely less than 2 years between Witcher 4's proper reveal and its actual launch. Expect possibly some light teases or short trailers a little earlier than that. We probably shouldn't expect a firm commitment to platforms early on, nor a PC-only release, although plans can, of course, always change, and hopefully a Phantom Liberty is a guide, and if those lessons truly have been learned, expect CD Projekt Red to launch The Witcher 4 a lot closer to the first release date it gets. And purely to speculate, the Game Awards, known for their hefty emphasis on major reveal trailers and teases, are just around the corner too, and CD Projekt has put some weight behind Keighley-powered events such as SGF before, most notably with the Phantom Liberty expansion reveal. We might see the first of those breadcrumbs quite soon. Do you guys think we see some teaser for The Witcher 4 at the Game Awards? Do you think we see that? Do we need to do a poll? I kind of expect them to do like a teeny tiny like Twitter post or something in a year or two. I don't expect them to do it at this, but I personally don't think so. Maybe a breadcrumb, if they mean a breadcrumb. Like, I just can't imagine a video. Like, if they're suggesting, like, at the Game Awards, I think that you would only ever see something bigger, but who knows? Maybe they bring out, like, the CEO and they bring out something and they just say, like, hey, here's the logo. Or you remember that old video, like the original announcement of God of War Ragnarok? Yeah, this. From the PS5 showcase. It was literally just snow.
yourself.
...2021. Oops. Yeah, it's... Maybe they do something like that, where you just hear Geralt go, "It's Morbin time." Maybe we see that, but I don't think we see anything more than that. Something like that minus the date. Yeah, just something. I think you could maybe see like, yeah, the wind's howling. You could do something like that. That I think is possible. I still don't really know. I mean, it's interesting that they're being so public about this, but they also just had their quarterly update, and I don't know, I think it's early. Because again, I still think it's somewhere between 2 and 3 years out still. Maybe it's different being on Unreal Engine. Maybe they can work faster. Maybe that's it. But I personally would be shocked if we got something. I'd be very excited, but I'd be shocked. Maybe something like what Hellblade 2 did, where they shut off the cinematic and there was nothing done at that point. Yeah, apparently that cinematic was like just proof of concept, but they didn't actually have anything from there. Maybe they do something like that. I just think like when they say a little breadcrumb here or there, I imagine like what some of the stuff that they'll do where they post like, oh, here's a random picture of a tree, and then it's got symbols carved into the bark. And then the internet goes detective mode and they solve it and translate it 15 different times, and it ends up suggesting we'll find out something more in 6 months. Like, I think that's what they're going to do when they start dropping breadcrumbs. I don't think of like a video like that being one of those breadcrumbs, but maybe I'm wrong. He took my thing.